You thought you had it all figured out. You'd got some great access to the group of participants that you wanted to do your research with. You had some interviews lined up, whether they were in person or online. But the time and the day of the interview rolls around and no one shows up. You're left waiting there in the Teams call wondering, how much longer should I stay here? Or you're sat there in a cafe waiting for a participant to show up and it's just you and your latte. Yeah, it sucks, doesn't it? Sometimes you think you've got it all figured out, you think that you're going to get your data collection done within 2 or 3 months and everything is all lined up and it's all ready to go and it's all fabulous. And then it all kind of goes to shit. This happens to most people who are doing research with other people because other people do these things, it just happens. So you need to figure out how you're going to deal with it when this happens, because I do honestly believe that it is a case of when, it is not a case of if. And the best way to be prepared for this kind of stuff is to anticipate it and to figure out what you're going to do when it happens. So that's what I'm going to be covering in this video. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Yardley and I've been supporting graduate social science students for the last 20 years. And so many of my students have come to me and said, I've had this interview lined up and the person didn't turn up, or I've been trying to get in touch with this participant who said that they were going to help me and they've just gone completely off the grid. This is completely normal and we just have to expect that it's going to happen in our fieldwork. I've learned a few things along the way of doing my own research and ending up in this situation and supporting my students who have unfortunately had their participants bail on them too. So what can we do about it? Well, we can understand why it is that people let us down or go AWOL in the first place. And secondly, we can identify some things that we can do to turn that around. And before we get started, I just want to say that students who have had these fieldwork disasters, these situations which have left them thinking, oh my God, what is the point? Am I ever going to get another interview? The students who this has happened to have always turned it around. They have always managed to get their interviews, get their focus groups, get their whatever done. And the data that they have ended up collecting is always way better than the data that they would have ended up collecting had those initial interviews actually panned out. So I think all of this stuff, to get philosophical for a moment, I think all of this stuff happens for a reason. Things go wrong so that we can course correct, so that we can identify better ways of doing things and ultimately end up with better data and better insights for our PhDs. So when your initial plans do not work out, it's not the end of the world. You just need to spend some time rethinking it. So without further ado and rambling from me, let's just get straight into it. So firstly, why don't participants turn up for interviews? Why do people let you down? Why do people go off the grid? Well, firstly, people are busy and they forget and it just kind of falls off their radar, it falls off their calendar. And I found that this is particularly the case in my own research and in my students' research when they've been doing an interview or a focus group or whatever with people who are professionals. And it's in their role as professionals that you are approaching them for an interview. You want to talk to them about their work. You want to talk to them about their experiences of working in a particular job or with a particular group of people. And inevitably, that job is going to be a busy one. Okay, especially if you are in the social sciences realm. If you're doing interviews with people who are working for a non-profit or a voluntary sector organisation, these people are like crazy busy, you know, trying to spin a lot of plates. And the same for people who are working in private enterprise. If you're doing research within a particular corporation, especially in the times that we're in at the moment, a lot of people working for big corporates and even working for charities have found that there are fewer of them to go around in an organisation. There are lots of organisations where there have been rounds of redundancies and there are fewer people there to do more work now. So you have to be a little bit understanding with people. You know, that is what they're working with. This is the context in which they are being a professional, trying to get their job done. They're under often some quite difficult circumstances and they're having to cope with an awful lot. So that's the first reason for people just forgetting. They're busy. And that's especially the case if you're wanting to do research with professionals. So be patient with people. You might be wanting to do research with another group of people. So rather than looking at professionals, you might be looking at clients, service users of a particular service. So this is very much the case for students who I look after. They are doing research with people who've been released from prison. They're doing research with people who are survivors of domestic abuse, of other types of violence and crime and trauma. And what can tend to happen in those scenarios is that you will agree to do an interview with somebody, and that person will be in a good place, things will be quite stable, they will be ticking along nicely. And then a few weeks later, when the interview is scheduled to happen, something has kicked off in their lives, and your research, it ain't their number one priority anymore. In fact, it has not been ever their number one priority. It was probably something that they were looking forward to doing because they wanted to share their views and share their opinions, and they were quite looking forward to talking to you about their experiences. But this thing has happened and their lives are now kind of a bit chaotic. So that can be another reason why that happens. And when you are researching with groups of people who are going to be up and down, who are going to have things kicking off and things happening that disrupt their plans, you need to be really patient and really empathetic with them. And you need to anticipate this kind of thing happening. So there will be interviews that you arrange and you call the person or you meet the person and everything's fine. It all goes ahead and wonderful, another interview done. But there will be other scenarios when the person doesn't turn up, and they don't call you to let you know, or they don't email you to let you know, and you just have to expect that will happen. And regardless of whatever group of people you're working with, I just want to emphasize that point about priority. Our research is massively important to us, isn't it? It's so crucial that we get these interviews done, that we collect our data, that we get through this phase of our PhD. But our research is not a priority to the people that we're researching with, okay? Yes, they think it's important. Yes, they're probably looking forward to talking to us about their experiences, but it is not at the top of their agenda, okay? It is one of those things that if everything else gets a little bit chaotic, their interview with us is probably the easiest thing, or the thing that is first going to slip off their to-do list. So we just have to get realistic about this and expect that these things are going to happen. The last reason why interviews don't happen, people don't turn up, people go off the grid, is because they're downright nervous and they are anxious about talking to you, about participating in your research. We need to remember that whilst for us, research is very much an everyday thing, it's normal, it's just something that happens in our lives, we're used to how it pans out and how it happens. That is not the case for most of the people that we're researching with. Being a participant in a research project is a big deal. It's something that is so outside other people's normality and so outside of their comfort zone that they are likely to get nervous and that they are likely to get anxious. And I think as researchers, we don't often acknowledge this. We don't often really realise that this is going on. People will worry about a whole host of things before a research interview, and sometimes that worry will culminate in them kind of pulling out, bailing out of it. And we need to really understand that us as a researcher going in to research with somebody, that can be quite intimidating. That can be quite a big deal. And we also have to think about kind of our social positioning as well here. We are academics from within an academic institution, and sometimes people can feel a little bit, awkward, a bit uncomfortable around us, because they don't know other people who are researchers. They don't know what we're all about, and we can be a little bit kind of intimidating. So those are some of the reasons why the interviews that we schedule sometimes just don't happen, or the focus groups or whatever. What can we do about it? I think firstly, we need to address the nerves and anxiety thing. So make sure that prior to an interview, you have actually taken the time to talk to people about any worries, about any questions, about any queries they've got about the research. Now, a lot of this will be covered by your ethical stuff, so your participant information sheet, your consent form, all of that nice stuff. But What we tend to find often as academics is those kind of documents are written in quite academic, like technical, intimidating language. So what can also be a helpful thing to do is to provide participants with something else, with something that is a little bit kind of friendlier, a little bit more relatable, that kind of eases any concerns that they might have. So you might want to come up with like a frequently asked questions document, just like a 1-page A4 thing that you can use to anticipate any worries that your participants might have about getting involved in your research, and just to reassure them in relatable everyday language, not in the kind of ethics committee technical jargon speak that some of your other materials might be in, but in accessible, relatable language. Okay, and this can be something that you email to them, it can be something that you give to them as a hard copy, whatever is going to be easiest for your participants. But I think it's always worth giving them something supplementary that's kind of I guess sort of makes you appear to be more of a human being than a research robot, basically. I actually did a video about this recently, so I will link to it up here as to how you can produce a document like this that is not intimidating and scary and really off-putting. Another thing that you can do, and I think this applies particularly to when you're researching with professionals who you are involving in your research because they do a particular job, is to send them an MS Teams invite or a calendar invite or something that they can click on, which will send it straight to their work calendar. So it's something that is actually on their agenda in that way. Because when we agree to stuff, I always find this is definitely the case with me. If somebody doesn't send me a meeting invite, if I've just got that written in a notebook, the chance of that dropping off the list are quite high. Okay, so just make it easy for people, especially people who have access to emails and calendars, electronic calendars through their work. So that can be a really good way of doing that. When you're working with people who you're not talking to in their role as professionals, you're talking to, service users or people from a particular group who've had a specific experience, sending them a calendar invite might not be realistic. Some people might not even have access, to an electronic calendar. So you need to think about different ways in which you can remind them about the interview. So in these scenarios, you might want to do something like send somebody a text message or drop them a note via the post. Yeah, snail mail. That's still a thing, and that can actually be quite effective. Another thing that can be really effective is to actually have a pre-interview chat with people. And that might be online, it might be in person, but it can be really helpful just to talk to somebody else human to human, before the interview. You might have had some contact with them before, over email or over text or whatever, but not actually ever interacted with them in any sort of face-to-face format. I think a pre-interview chat is a really good way of actually just initially breaking the ice with somebody, so that by the time you come to actually do the interview or whatever research you're doing with them, it's not the first time that they're encountering you. They can kind of get used to you a little bit, you can get used to them a little bit, and the actual interview or the research encounter, whatever it looks like, when it actually happens, is going to be so much easier and it's just going to go so much more smoothly. One other thing that I would recommend doing is actually getting in touch with the person that you're due to do the interview with. I keep saying interview all the time. You might not be doing an interview with people, you might be doing other stuff. You might be doing some kind of observation or a focus group or, something else. But replace when I say interview with whatever thing that you're doing with your participants. So what was I talking about? Yeah, I was saying, you should get in touch with people a couple of days before the interview with them, just to check that they're still okay to have the interview at that time, and to ask any questions that they might have had come up for them, over the preceding weeks or days since you last spoke to them. Ask them if they're still okay to go ahead with the interview, if there's anything that they want to change, the location, the time, whatever, that kind of thing. Giving people the option to have a little bit of flexibility can often be really beneficial, because I know some of the people that I did interviews with, this was right at the start of my academic career actually, they, and I learned this through talking to them in the actual interview itself, they really wanted to change the venue, or they really wanted to change the time, but they didn't feel kind of able to do that. They felt awkward asking me to do that, and that they just didn't, basically. And I think I probably lost quite a few potential participants through not checking in with them a couple of days beforehand. So make sure that you do that, because sometimes people are just a bit reluctant, a bit nervous to ask you to change stuff, even though that would make it like way more convenient for them. So do make sure that you check in with them a couple of days beforehand, and this will be really beneficial. One thing that I would say just lastly is make sure that you have something else that you can do if they don't turn up. So don't have it so you're sat there twiddling your thumbs, you're sat there with nothing to do. So say that you've agreed to meet a participant in a coffee shop and they're just not shown. Make sure that you've got a book with you, or your laptop with you, or your notebook with you, so that you can just do something else, so that it doesn't feel like it's a waste of your time. So that's what to do to maximise the chances of people showing up to things that you have already got arranged. What do you do if you have literally kind of started from zero at this point? You have no other interviews lined up, you've experienced lots of people kind of bailing on you and not turning up for interviews, you've exhausted your pool of participants. Like, what can you do about that? Well, you need to find some new potential participants, and you need to do something different, because what worked before, or what might have worked before for, you know, some of your interviews, is not working now. If you have run out of options, if you have no other interviews in the diary, you need to start thinking differently. You need to DSD, do something different. That might involve finding a new gatekeeper, somebody who can give you access to the group of people that you're interested in reaching. So talk to your supervisors about that. Talk to other PhD students who've had similar issues. Is there anybody who your participants will be coming into contact with on a regular basis, who can kind of ease your transition into that community, who can give you that kind of path to get you in front of this group and to actually get you access to them? If you want to try something a bit different from gatekeepers, you might want to think about just not using gatekeepers, and talk to your supervisory team about this, because I think there are often ethical issues that come up around this. But one thing that you could potentially do is go meet your participants where they are at. Where do they hang out? Where do they go? Where do they spend their time? Perhaps go there, you know, and get talking to some of the people who potentially could be your participants, and just take the time to learn a little bit more about them. And when you do that with kind of no initial agenda, no initial kind of burning desire to nail an interview down right then and there on that day, but just to find out a bit more about these people's lives and their challenges and their struggles, you get into a position where you can much better understand the kind of research approach that might actually work. And linked to that, you might want to piggyback onto existing things. So when you're thinking about meeting people where they are at, is there anything that they go to regularly? Are there any groups that they attend, any clubs, any kind of regular things in their diary that you could kind of go along to and meet them that way? Are there any regular get-togethers or support groups, either online or in person, that you could go along to meet potential participants? So, for example, say that you want to do research with parents of children under 5. Are there any parent and child groups in your local area that you could go along to? Could you get in touch with the person who organises that group and say to them, hey, I'm doing some research and I'd really like to talk to parents of under 5s. Would you mind if I came and hung out at your get-together this week? Is that okay? And then ask if you can have 5 minutes just to talk to the whole group and explain to them what you're doing in your research, and invite them to come and find out more or to participate in it. One thing that we often forget as researchers is that we need to invest time building rapport with our research participants. So we do tend to think that this is just the first 5 minutes of the interview when we're, you know, just getting to know people and putting them at ease. Like, no, you need to think about it in much more broader terms than that. There are some people who will need quite a lot of time to warm up to you, especially if they're not overly familiar with the idea of a researcher. They don't really know who a researcher is and what they do, and you know, there's a bit of anxiety there. You need to go and spend time with these people. You need to go and answer their questions and explain to them in relatable terms what it is that you do, what your research is all about. And building up that trust, building up that relationship with people is going to take time. Sometimes this can take days, sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes it takes months, and other times it takes years. So you do have to make that effort. And I've found with the students that I've looked after, and indeed with some of the research that I've done myself, the more commitment that I've made to actually building trust and rapport with people, the more that I've put in to that side of doing a research project, the better outcome I've got, the more detailed insights people have been able to give me, the more helpful, the more kind of open people have been about their experiences. And you'll find that that is very much the case with qualitative research. Often we're talking to people about stuff that is deeply personal, that is can often be quite triggering for them, can be, you know, really, really significant things that have happened in their lives. They're not just going to talk to somebody who helicopters in one day and then helicopters out again. You have to really take the time to build up your relationships with your potential participants. And you have to realise that you might put all of this time and all of this effort into building a relationship with this group of people, and not all of them will want to talk to you. Not all of them will want to do an interview with you. Perhaps only a couple of them will. And, you know, that is just the way things are. And it can help to compare it to when we are buying something that's really expensive, you know, like a new car or something like that. We don't just jump straight in, do we? We don't just head off to the car dealership or the car garage and buy a car. We ponder it, we think about it, we reflect, we weigh up the pros and cons, we really kind of take our time with it. And when people are agreeing to participate in your research, they are agreeing to invest time in you, to invest time in your research. So you need to earn their trust, because they're often disclosing stuff that is quite personal to them. This really is an investment on their part. So you need to understand that. They are not going to kind of bite the minute that you drop the bait in the water. Sometimes you've got to hang out there for a while. So give it time, be empathetic, be understanding, and be flexible. Now, the last thing that I want to say before we finish up is that if you are making changes to the way that you're recruiting participants, you need to make sure that your ethics committee knows about that, because the research that you have ethical approval to do might have to change. Okay, you might have to develop a new way of recruiting participants, or develop a new way of even doing the research altogether. And you need to tell your ethics committee about that, and they potentially need to look at that again before they can give their approval for that. That is a really important thing to do, because you have approval to carry out the research that you've got approval to do. You don't have approval to do this new thing that is perhaps a fantastic idea, but hasn't actually been looked over by the people on your ethics committee. Now, in most cases, like, institutions are pretty reasonable. If you make a change or an adjustment to your research, then they're not going to ask you to put it through the entire ethics committee from start to finish again. What they will often do is have the chair of the ethics committee just look at what you're proposing to do and either give you the nod and say, yeah, great, go ahead, or make some suggestions as to changes that you should make to it. So super important that you do that, because there are lots of official reasons for this as well. So if you go and do a piece of research that you haven't got ethical approval for, that has implications for your university or your college's insurance policy. So were anything to go wrong, yeah, you could be in the shit, the university could be in the shit. It would just not end well. So new approaches, new ways of doing things will throw up new ethical issues. So please make sure that you tell your ethics committee about them. And that's it, we're done. So hopefully you've found some helpful stuff in this video. If you've ever been in a situation where a participant hasn't turned up, if you're tearing out your hair because you just don't know how you're going to get those final interviews, hopefully you've got some ideas now as to how you can take your project forward. So I will be back soon with more tips on all things dissertation and postgraduate study, so I will see you then.